Welcome to the Everton FABCast, the official podcast of the Everton Fan Advisory Board.
So welcome to the Everton FABCast, the official podcast of the Everton Fan Advisory Board. My name is Paul, known as Pablo, and yes, we have got our guest today is Kieran Maguire, the football finance lecturer, author and podcaster. And also I've got our chair, Dave Kelly, who's going to introduce what we're going to be chatting about today.
Yeah, thanks for that, Pablo. I think it's always difficult trying to introduce somebody who needs no introduction, but I was fortunate enough to attend a podcast that Kieran did in Liverpool University last Monday evening, and Liverpool is famous for its Mad Mondays, and I can say that certainly Kieran and Kevin Day didn't disappoint. It was clearly extremely entertaining and informative. Took the opportunity to throw Kieran around the room and convince him to join us on the podcast. I think, like most things we do, we'll try and keep this as informal as possible. But I think, given the expertise and the experience Kieran's got within the game, we thought he would make an ideal guest for the Fan Advisory Board. So, welcome aboard, Kieran. And I think, to use the old Alan Ball adage, once Everton touch you, nothing else is ever the same.
Well, thanks very much, Dave, and thanks, Pablo. I'm looking forward to this. I've worked in the city for on and off for 40 years, so yeah, the city of Liverpool is part of my life, and it's a privilege to be here.
Yeah. And I think, to be honest with you, Kieran, I think a couple of things, and I certainly picked up on this on Monday evening. I think football is at a watershed moment at the current time. There's that much going on, and I'm not just talking about the mad world and the lunacy that is Everton Football Club at the moment, but there's a number of significant things that is going to happen in the relatively near future. And I'm really interested, given the role and involvement that with regards to the Tracy Crouch fan-led review. And just to give you a brief bullet point history, I think Everton Football Club Fan Advisory Board is probably more advanced than most of the others. We'd started off a little bit earlier than most when we set up an organisation called the Everton Stakeholder Supporters Groups, where we met for very nearly 12 months, trying to make sure that we covered everything to the letter of what was being advocated. And it was really important to us at that time. The club had gone through quite a traumatic period with openly vote by the fans marching and protesting before every game. It was important to us that we put the proper and correct foundations in place to make sure that our fan advisory board was going to be totally independent and autonomous from the club. So although we've got the privileged position where we meet with the senior management team and members of the board on a quarterly basis, one of the most difficult things we've had is demonstrating to the fans that we are truly independent. Initially, there's a lot of suspicion. We know one of the things we've done, we've reached out to every other club. So every time we play a club, home or away, we try and touch base with them, we try and meet with them, and we try and talk through the process that we went through. And it is, unfortunately, it's just incredibly long-winded process of setting up a memorandum of understanding in terms of reference and all the rest of it. So probably covered a lot more there. I know particularly lots of other fans have got concerns now that their own clubs are trying to move, excuse the pun, the goalposts, and want club employees though to sit on fan advisory board. So I'd be interested in what your insight is on the direction of travel.
Well, I think you've put in the hard yards. It's quite clear from this, Dave. And as you know from your own experience, it's doing the boring things. It's dotting the I's and crossing the T's in terms of ensuring that relationship. I know some clubs where the fan advisory board is little more than, it's nice to have a cup of tea and a biscuit with the chief executive and the owner, and everybody gets a little bit flattered, and you get to see the shirts a couple of weeks earlier before everybody else, and once the clubs get you into that, they think that they own you. So I think what you've been saying there is absolutely critical. As football fans, we are stakeholders, and we've got a lifelong investment in a football club. It's a financial investment partly, but it's an emotional investment most of all. And therefore, the fan advisory boards have the opportunity to be the critical friend to the club, because ultimately we all want the same thing. You want Everton to be successful, or Rochdale to be successful, or Torquay. It doesn't matter the club. And football is a unique business, because if my local garage goes bust and I've been going there for the last 10 years, I'll be upset. I've got a relationship with the garage owner, but I'll go to the next one in the town. You can't do that in football. It's unthinkable. When you talk to fans of clubs such as Bury, who went through that period of time when there was nothing to do, it sounds melodramatic, but it's not. It's like losing part of the family, because that unique relationship that we have between fan and football club, and it's not the football which binds us, it's going to the same pub before the match, having a chat with those same guys or girls or whoever it's going to be, reminiscing about those moments in your life which have been so enhanced through supporting Everton Football Club, or whoever the football club should be, which as we get older, and we're not being rude here, none of us are young, those are the greatest things in our life. And when you see circumstances, and when you see people in positions of power, both within the game, and that's within the club, but also on a more general level, who have no understanding of what that means to us as Evertonians, or in my case, I'm a Brighton fan, or it doesn't matter the club. We've all got that same relationship. It is disturbing, and I think you're absolutely right that yes, we're here to talk about Everton, but the direction of travel of the game, and to us it is still a game, but to them it's an industry, to them it's an investment, is one which I think we all are concerned about.
I think that the perfect lesson was learned, I felt, during COVID, when the Premier League and the broadcasters, with this very valuable commodity that goes around the world to a global audience, and it makes the Premier League the obscenely rich organisation that it is. Their commodity was a lesser commodity. So then they're making all the noise and making it vibrant and generating that atmosphere. You'd have thought that a lesson would have been learned from that they need us to be going along with them on that journey. Otherwise, football's going to struggle.
You're absolutely right. I mean, what fans do is that they convert a soulless bowl or square or whatever it's going to be. A football ground with fans becomes a living, breathing organism, because you're absolutely right. And we saw it. The matches that we saw during COVID were glorified training exercises. And yes, we were all watching because there was nothing else to do. And of course, you want your team to win. But I struggle to remember any of the matches that I watched during COVID because I wasn't there, or even the matches which I saw on television. You went up with the crowd at those moments, and I do think this is something which is taken for granted. I think there's a genuine concern amongst fans, and we know that football has a pecking order in terms of global appeal to certain clubs, but there are owners of some of those bigger clubs, and in terms of that global fan base, who they don't want the local fans there, because they won't go and spend 200 quid in the mega store. They won't buy every piece of tat that's put out. They won't pay the enhanced prices that are being charged. And we are seeing the traditional fan being squeezed out. And the guy in charge of Real Madrid, Florentino Perez, he describes us as legacy fans.
Yeah.
But we were the fans who were still going in the 80s when it was tough being a football fan, and we were living through pretty hard economic times, and we were treated as pariahs by the establishment. And now that football's become sexy, we're not wanted. And I think it is important that you fight for the soul of the game.
It's funny you say that, Kieran. I was saying to my grandson on Saturday when we were up at Old Trafford, that Man United's first game in the Premier League at Old Trafford was against Everton. Do you know what the attendance was?
No.
30-odd thousand.
Oh, yeah. Good grief.
And that's how much the Premier League and the riches has enabled all the clubs to kick on, and it has. It's almost reaching the point now where they've created a monster. They've created a Frankenstein, whereby legacy fans are no longer welcome. They don't want them there. Probably much the same as lots of other sports. They become a television program rather than a sporting occasion, and it's a very, very, very difficult line to go down, isn't it? And make sure that you call that correctly, because once it loses that, I'm involved in fan support and food banks. I started that in Liverpool.
Brilliant.
With the idea about us going and doing things with other clubs and putting tribal differences to one side, but we need them tribal differences for the 90 minutes as well.
Yeah.
And I know doing a food bank collection outside there Anfield yesterday, we've been there 3 hours before kick-off. The supporters from all over the world there. And it's almost as if it's on the bucket list, isn't it? I have to go to Liverpool, I have to go to United, I have to go to Arsenal, etc., etc. And to a lesser degree, clubs like Everton and Brighton. I know down in Brighton the other week when we played yous, it's exactly the same thing, isn't it? There's a global audience now coming, and it's actually changing. And I think the point you made there earlier on, Kieran, is the three of us are all of a similar age.
Yep.
We need to be making sure that we're getting kids inside stadium. Our kids are the club's legacy. It's our kids who should be looking after, getting looked after. It's our kids who should be guaranteed, if you like, that there should be tickets reserved for local young children to be able to go to football games and support the clubs. Otherwise, you potentially lost generations forever.
You're absolutely right, and it will be too late when they realise the mistakes that have been made. So, having that capacity to bring through the next generation. I teach here at the University of Liverpool, and I've been teaching here for over a good few years now. When you hear the likes of Perez and co saying young people aren't interested in football, he's talking nonsense. Because the passion's still there. But I was at university in Manchester at the start of the 1980s. I could afford to go to Old Trafford and Main Road. I used to go each Saturday because I didn't have any particular affiliations for either team, but I just wanted to watch football. And then on a Friday night, I go to Tranmere or Rochdale, or whoever was playing on a Friday night. And you can't do that today if you're a young person. And I'm sure you're in touch with many other fan groups. We've just seen Spurs announce that A, prices are going up by 6%, but B, if you're our age, you're not going to get concessions anymore. They're phasing out people of our generation from and we're not earning a salary. And football, it's the one thing. Yes, we always put our families first, and we have to pay. But football is that the one luxury that we allow ourselves, and we're going to be denied that.
Yeah, it's like that with the you think about that disposable income. It's not, is it? It's a must. It's not a, I always, whenever I'm talking to anyone about managing your finances, everyone's got disposable income, and you've got the difference between want and need. Yeah, this is what I want. This is what I need. We all need football. It's in the need column, even though it should really be in the want column, if you know what I mean. Just what you said about the Spurs thing. I saw a few things over the last few days since the Spurs announced that last week. That I've seen quite a few youngsters as well saying that they are being priced out at Tottenham, like the sort of early 20s, because they can't afford the tickets. And Tottenham apparently tried to justify that decision by saying that they've now got 4 times as many seniors as they had at White Hart Lane at the new stadium. It's got like four times as many senior season ticket holders in that new stadium. Now, obviously, they've got an increase in capacity, but that shouldn't cater for a 4 times increase in senior tickets. So you're showing that basically the older people can afford it, can afford to go to them, because obviously they're buying the tickets, but they're pricing out the younger ones. And if you can't afford to buy a season ticket until you're 30, say, until you're earning that amount of money, then where do they go in those 10, 12 years, when they're out in the working world and they can't afford to go to a football match? And obviously that worries me with Everton going into the new stadium, because obviously we're going to have to try and maximise everything with that as well.
Yeah, and I think there will be pressure, and it will be driven by finances to focus on the corporate seats, and the money that they bring in, and you become an afterthought. I think it's very interesting. I think it was Hoeneß at Bayern Munich who says we could put up the prices of our tickets by 10% and we'd still sell out the Allianz Arena every single match, but we choose not to do so because it will bring us an extra €2 million, €3 million a year. That's one extra win compared to a draw in a single match in the Champions League. We'd rather have the respect of our fans, and I think many football club executives have become disconnected from the fan bases, and they don't understand what it's like. As part of I was doing a little bit of research this morning. I was teaching first, and I was coming on to your show, and I was looking at executive pay in the Premier League, and £2 million a year is the going rate. Now, I'm not saying that they don't deserve it. That's a separate bit. If you're running a £150 million, a £200 million business, you expect to be paid well. But I think it also means that even if you were once from sort of our background in terms of doing a regular job and so on, you do lose that disconnect as to the value of money and the importance of being able, because in what are pretty tough times, let's face it, life's not a lot of fun these days, and football is our one escape. Even if it's a crap result at the weekend, you recover by Monday morning and you're already looking forward to what's happening on Saturday, ideally going along to that match with your friends, reconnecting, and one of the few. Football is not a luxury. I agree exactly what you mean, Pablo. It is, for me, it's a necessity. You make all the sacrifices. I make all the sacrifices I can just to stay on the right side of being divorced. In terms of taking what my wife says is me taking the mickey to go out with my mates all the time watching football. But it's getting harder and harder, and it's getting harder and harder for people who already are living pretty tough lives.
Well, I think you make a really good point there. I know I was involved in the FSA's 20s Plenty campaign to get a cap bid on away match tickets. And I vividly remember going through the front door in Premier League headquarters to meet Richard Scudamore, who tried to convince us that we're actually getting our football far too cheaply. And they do need a reality check. When we were asking for price caps to be put on away tickets, I think the initial reaction was one of laughing in our faces and saying, you're getting the far too cheaply, you should be paying a lot more. But I think I think this is the thing that most fans don't get. They don't realise how powerful a collective fans' voice is, and that's the trick to us. And people talk about the German model and the 50% plus one and all the rest of it. I'm not sure that we'd ever be in that sort of position, but we can certainly influence the direction that football's going in by working together collectively, and that's why it's really important to us as a FAB and us to Evertonians. I think given what we've gone through over the last couple of years is graphically illustrated with the direction of travel that the game's going in. And we always see in that 10 points deduction, it's not as an exclusively Everton thing, it's exclusively a football thing. We were saying at the time that it could be Notts Forest next week. It could be Aston Villa the week after, and the list is endless. And I think that probably takes us on quite nicely to their profit and sustainability, which I refer to as profit and unsustainability, because it's actually forcing clubs now to make themselves more unsustainable because they're selling the better players. I dare say that the Everton Football Club that's played this season will be a totally different one with Anthony Gordon and Richarlison playing alongside it. I think it's widely regarded Everton are creating chances as if they're going out of fashion, but can't bury them. We'd certainly be comfortably mid-table chasing the European spot if PSR rules hadn't dictated that one, that our club's badly run, and two, you better sell some of your best players to their forward. That itself, PSR, isn't sustainable, Kieran, is it?
No, I mean, I don't think at the time they knew what they were creating. There was the PSR rules came on the back of the original set of financial fair play rules, which were themselves introduced because the Super League 6, whatever you want to call them, but yeah, we all know who we're talking about. 6 into 4 doesn't go when it comes to Champions League places, and so therefore that meant that 2 clubs are missing out each year because there was no other competition. But Manchester City before 2008 weren't a concern. Chelsea before 2003 and Abramovich weren't a concern. If you take a look at that Premier League table for that very first season, where some of these clubs who now consider themselves to be the elite and we're supposed to sort of tug our forelocks towards them, their concern was that there could be another Chelsea or another Manchester City, and how could they create a mechanism where on the explicit claims were, oh, we're doing this for the good of the game, but implicitly the aim was to prevent somebody else coming in and say, well, I want to do the same as Abramovich, I want to do the same as Mansour. I'm doing it because I get a bit of fun out of it. It's a trophy asset. But you were saying, Dave, you go, you talk to other clubs. I don't know a single Newcastle fan or Manchester City fan or even a Chelsea fan who says, well, we don't like the new owners who've come in. And if those clubs have been able to benefit, why can't it be Everton? Why can't it be Villa? Why can't it be Leeds? Because there are people out there, and it's.
I think the ironic thing on all of that, though, Kieran, is if you rewind a little bit to 1992 when the Premier League started, it was the Big Five. And the Big Five included Everton.
Yep.
It was
rightly so.
It was Sir Philip Carter who brokered the deal and instigated the formation of the Premier League. It then very quickly became the top 4 because of the Champions League nonsense, didn't it? and now it's a big six, and it's always been about. And don't get me wrong, when Everton were instrumental in setting up the Premier League, I passionately will tell anybody, I watched Everton all the way, all of my life. But I will say to people first, I'm a football fan and an Evertonian. And I probably didn't feel the pain that you was feeling when Brighton went through what they went through. And that's what it's all about, isn't it? It's about respecting the pyramid. It's about respecting the values of the game, the sporting integrity of the game. I never thought I'd reach a stage in my life. It's pointless even looking at a league table now.
Well,
the integrity of the league table has been brought into question, isn't it? Once you've lost that, you've lost everything, haven't you?
Well, when your best player is a lawyer or an accountant, or potentially your best player is a lawyer and accountant, yeah, I'm an accountant. We're crap at football. I guarantee you. Yeah, I used to play. I played in the Manchester Sunday Morning Accountants League. You'd have never seen such a gentle bunch in all your life. The only good thing was that the table at the end of each week's fixtures was always accurate. That was about as good as it got.
Yeah, that's the sad thing for me, is that, you know, my brother just goes to watch the match, comes home, goes on a few pints with him. Yeah, he knows, he doesn't care any about any of this. You know, there's no and I've been sort of, you know, coming to AGMs and EGMs for, since the early 2000s and stuff like that. But I've only recently decided to get involved with this and the FAB, because I sort of thought that the fans were getting a bit more of a voice, and the fan advisory board, with it being mandated by the Premier League, even if it is a, you know, tick box exercise, even if it's to try and fend off an independent regulator, from our point of view, that doesn't really matter, because even if they're seeing it like that, well, we'll take that opportunity and to try and kick the doors in and actually have a say. You're going to give us a voice, even if it's, you know, just a lip service kind of voice. Well, we'll shout. We'll make sure that we're sort of doing that. So I'm trying to get involved with that, but everyone nowadays, they need to know about finance, they need to know about this, and it's killing. No one wants to do that. You know, no one wants. Everyone just wants to go and watch a game of football, get excited about it, moan about the referee and the decisions that actually happened on the pitch. But you don't want to be, you know, thinking about. And as Dave said, this league table at the moment now, normally at this stage of the season, you're looking, well, I think we need this many more points. We've got no idea how many more points we need, and neither have Forest, and neither of the teams around us. Yeah. So you could be playing games now where you're thinking, we'll take a point there. Well, actually, if we knew that we were going to be getting points taken off, well, actually, we need to go for a win with that. So it changes the whole thing. Do you think that the PSL rules as they are, it's like at the moment it's like a reactive, delayed system. So you're doing it. So is there a way of making that more proactive and more real time options to sort of, you know, to do things more as you're going along, rather than looking in the past and say, well, that's that. Is there something that could be done about that?
Yeah, what we're effectively doing at present is that we're looking at a rear view mirror going back for 3 years. I can barely remember what I had for breakfast yesterday, let alone what happened 3 years ago. And why 3 years? Why not 1? Why not 5? A lot of the rules seem very arbitrary. When I used to be an accountant, I specialised in corporate distress. What do you want to call it? I was an administrator. You know, if a company was going bust, it was my job to go in and investigate the circumstances beforehand. And if it was the worst case scenario, you then go and say, right, well, we need to try to protect the company through going through the administration route. We always look towards the future, because we said, okay, what's your order book? What's the cash coming in? Whereas the Premier League and the EFL, all of their focus is what's happened in history. There's no reason, and I think the rules, or I think certainly some of the people involved, and I know this certainly, I'm much closer at an EFL level. I've got sort of a much better relation. I've got no relationship with the Premier League, and I don't have an issue with that. You know, I'm just a teacher as far as they're concerned, and I'm a bit of a pest, which so you keep those people at arm's length. There's no reason why you can't have real-time monitoring. They certainly have it in Scotland. They have it in the EFL these days. If you're interested in sustainability, if you've got a new owner coming in and they say, I want to spend this amount of money, we're going to lose so much, the Premier League says, right, well, you need to go and put money into a secure bank account to cover those potential losses for the next 3 years or the 5 years, and then go and do what the hell that you want, because you've got the sustainability issue addressed. We're not addressing that at present. When, you know, it's I appreciate there are unique circumstances at Everton, but you could say that there's unique circumstances at Reading, there's unique circumstances at Morecambe. Every case has its own merits and demerits, but by having an element of protection for the future, and football's not about making profits, and I think they're really cheeky to call it profitability anyway, because 18 out of 20 clubs in the Premier League lose money unless they sell players. That you look at cash flow, and you look at creating something which can protect the club if the circumstances of the owner changes. That happened with Abramovich. It's happened with Mashiri. All three of us can say off air, we know what's happened, but we're not going to do it publicly because we don't want to upset people. A change in Farhad Mashiri's personal circumstances in terms of his ability to fund the club, which has led to where we are today. You could have avoided that 6 or 7 years ago by you take over the club, you stick in a £300 million bond because those are the losses expected for the next 3 years, and you're covered.
Yeah.
I think I've been saying now for quite some time, and probably something you won't like, Kieran, but I'm going to say it anyway. Football and football supporters and fans, we need to get back to team sheets, not spreadsheets.
Yeah.
Talking to the lads outside Old Trafford on Saturday, and people are talking about the team news. You're not even interested no more in the team news. It's enough having to go and suffer for the 90 minutes and then come out the ground and wonder what's next, what's coming at us next, where do we go, how do we mount a campaign. And I think I said this year on Monday night when we spoke about I think the significant changes that are coming into football will be graphically illustrated by the AFC Fan Advisory Board being able to put in the statements, the submission to the appeal panel. And I think that's hugely significant. And I would like to think that Forest and Forest fans will be afforded exactly the same. The same as what we did, because whether they like it or not, Mashiri might not own 94.1% of the shares, but that club's ours.
Exactly. You're the spirit. You're the emotional owners.
Without us, and people say to me, when Mashiri sells his share, you've got a share. How much would you make on your share? And I always say, my share's only worth £1. That's what it's got on it. It's £1 share. However, it's got no monetary value. It's got an emotional value. My share isn't for sale, no matter how much. That's my emotional interest in the football club. I've dedicated my life to supporting. But I think that's really important. That the thing about fans need to be given a bigger say. I think most people are now aware of the bill that's going to go before Parliament, the independent regulator as well. To be honest with you, my concern would be I would be absolutely distraught if an independent regulator is appointed, which he has been, and hasn't been given the tools to do the job. We can't be done in a half measure. It's got to be full blown out. And I think the Premier League have clearly demonstrated over the last couple of years that it isn't fit to govern. The governance isn't there. The game is badly governed. And that independent regulator, in my opinion, needs to be armed to the teeth. And he needs to be given powers, and he needs to be given the considerable influence he should have on things like PSR. And I'm really worried that he won't get that. And that it's probably going to be a tick boxing exercise.
I think there is a fear amongst some fans and observers. What you're saying is exactly right, Dave. The Premier League has had a a policy. It's using influencers. It's using lobbyists. That we're not used to that world in politics at Westminster, of dilute, deny, divert, and people will lose interest very quickly, especially when it's not their club. And the regulator, the downside of the regulator is that it won't get involved on PSR issues. It will certainly delegate that back to the Premier League. There is a fear. I was talking to a chief executive of an EFL club last week, or so 2 weeks ago, and he said that what the Premier League want as far as giving more money to clubs in the EFL concerned is that you won't be able to use the regulator except very much as a last resort. And again, they'll just try to make it a toothless tiger. You've submitted to Tracy Crouch, and I've submitted, and I've written a couple of research papers on behalf of the government to just show the extent of the poor state of governance and financial controls within the game. And it is a genuine worry going forward. I would much rather be out of a job. I just go back to being a normal teacher instead of teaching this subject, which in an ideal world wouldn't exist and wouldn't have to exist.
Yeah.
And we shouldn't be having this conversation.
Oh, absolutely. Alan, it's a worry that it'll be a box ticking exercise. I firmly believe that whatever what's going on, that bill will go through Parliament fairly quickly, and I think given that there's an impending election, it's an easy win, isn't it, for the government to say, well, look, we're sorting football out, the opium for the masses, the Tory parties, the parties to look after football for you, which is a worry. I think the other thing is, as well as so we're very nearly 12 months in now. What a lot of people don't realise, that one of the conditions of fan advisory boards is the end of year report that FABs have got to write and the clubs have got to write. And it'll be really interesting, won't it? Because I think one of the problems to this, there's probably only half a dozen FABs already up and running and relatively independent and autonomous. It'll be interesting to see how the Premier League reacts to that, because basically the clubs who aren't compliant have breached their rules. Are they going to take punitive action against the clubs that haven't? I don't know, because you wouldn't know which way they're going to run. And I think it came as a massive blow and a big shock. And it's my understanding that when they announced our 10-point deduction on the Friday afternoon, I think the Premier League were absolutely astonished that we managed to get an early day motion before Parliament within 48 hours of them imposing that sanction on us. And they nearly cried their hind legs off on the basis, but how dare you go and put this in the political arena, that we're attempting to stay out. And I think I attended a meeting with the Premier League in December, and I actually said to Richard Masters, this has been a PR disaster for you. You haven't shot yourself in the foot. You've actually blown your legs off. You've actually demonstrated to the government and to the country, to all the fans of all the clubs, that the Premier League isn't fit to govern.
Yeah, I mean, the rules seem to be being made up on the hoof.
Yeah.
And we've had various forms of cost control operating in the game for more than a decade. So surely there should be something which all the clubs know in advance. If you do this, then this are the repercussions. And why they chose to not go down that route is beyond me. I don't know whether it was at the back of their mind that it was more convenient with regards to the charges against Manchester City, or whether they didn't feel that there would ever be a situation in which they would be charging individual clubs. But you look at any type of law. Yeah, if I'm speeding, I know if I'm doing 100 on the motorway, I know in advance. Okay, this is what you're going to do, and I make that decision. I know that if I do 75, I'll get a minor telling off. If I'm doing 100 or 120, I'm running the risk of not being able to drive. Well, surely football clubs should have been told that in advance. And then I think you could honestly say that if Mashiri or Mansour or Saudi Arabian PIF fund, if they breach the rules, then they've got no comeback. But there's been no guidance given, and I think that there's been other issues which just seem to make no sense. So I did calculations in terms of index linking the £105 million limit, because the world has got more expensive, but football has got ridiculously more expensive since 2013. So rules which were perhaps appropriate for 2013 aren't appropriate for 2024. They're now introducing a wage control cap, which is linked to revenue. So that's automatically index linking to extra money coming into the game. Why didn't that apply to Everton? So it just seems to be poorly thought out. I appreciate that, Richard Masters comes in for a lot of criticism, some of which is justified, but from the more and more that I hear, he's got an impossible job, because you've got 20 different people with 20 different focuses, and they can't agree on anything these days. It's have civil war, which again goes back to your point you made earlier, Dave, that it's not possible to govern itself.
Yeah. And I think that's the crux of the whole matter, to be honest with you, about the index length. 13 years and they haven't moved that 105 million. You'd have to ask yourself the question why. And the only answer I can come up with is because they thought that it was something that they would never have to use. Yeah. And they've actually used Everton as the guinea pig to say to the government, look, no, we are going, we've got our hands at the tiller here, but in total can charge, look, here's what we're doing. But they haven't. That would cure most of the ill straight away, wouldn't it? That 105 million being index linked from 2030, with 11 years on, and it hasn't moved a penny, has it?
That's right. And so I based it on the increase in revenue in the Premier League since 2013. So it would now be, I think it was 216 million. Yeah. No charges against Everton, no charges against Forest, no charges against Leicester, because they're now going to be charged when they return to the Premier League. So if they get promoted, they'll get charged by the Premier League, and if they don't get promoted, they're going to be charged by the EFL. And the only reason why Leicester haven't had a points deduction this season is because they've got a really good lawyer. If we had a single body, if we go back to having the 92 clubs under the same umbrella, you've got a set of rules which apply to all 92 clubs, and we wouldn't be seeing these type of situations, which, again, I appreciate it's not, you're right, you said you're a football fan first and foremost. If I was a fan of Southampton or Leeds or West Brom, and I'm seeing Leicester get away with not having to sell any players in January because they're playing the EFL off against the Premier League, I'll be absolutely livid.
Yeah, it's all a bit of a. I mean, I'm new into this. I only joined the FAB and think I'm a financial dunce. I've got no finance and business is not my thing at all. So I've tried to look at this as in a non-partisan way. As I've not been all about all the corrupt and all of that sort of thing. I've tried to look at it as if to say, well, if the clubs have voted for this, why have the clubs voted for? Why have 14 of the clubs and the thing? Why have they voted for these rules when they're when they're so vague and they're so and also you've got the thing about the Premier League trying to do a dual role, really, where they're trying to promote and build something whilst at the same time trying to regulate it and punish and be, and you can't do those two things, can you? You've got to have one role or the other. And we want the Premier League to be, we all want our clubs to be successful, and we want the top pyramid of football to be the best it can be. But you can't do that if it's plucked out of thin air. As you say, you need a tariff. You need to know if you do this, then you do that. And I think what exacerbates it a bit with Everton's thing is that, we've been moaning about it for 10, 15 years about how badly the club's been run. So the fans have been complaining about this, and this is why we wanted to put our 2 penneth in, because that Dave mentioned earlier on the witness statement that we put into the appeal. That wasn't anything that we were invited to do. We took it upon ourselves to actually do. And this is not me. This is other members of the FAB, by the way. I'm not taking any credit for me. I was really impressed with what we put together with the barrister that helped us out with it and that. But that's if we hadn't done that, then there is, taking it upon ourselves to do that. There's no actual sort of redress in there to say, right, okay, so here we go. We're going into this process. So can we hear from what the clubs say, what the fans say? All of that needs to be there, and it needs to be written down, doesn't it?
It does. It just gives us certainty. It's, as you say, you've been aware for a number of years that there were things at the club which didn't make sense. And, as Dave was saying, we just want to go along on a Saturday afternoon, watch our team, cheer or moan. It's all part of the game. Winning and losing, we all know that. But at the same time, as part of FAB, it's your job, and you've taken that on, as volunteers, to protect the club. And you wonder, well, why is there nobody else trying to protect Everton? Because the Premier League haven't done so. They've effectively seemed to thrown you to the wolves. And is that due to the fans? No, it's due to Farhad Moshiri. It's due to a board of directors who I think it's fair to say that I don't think there's anything been malicious done at that level, but it's been a combination of complacency, arrogance, financial mismanagement. And that's sort of my observation as somebody outside of the club, and I just get to see the numbers. This why has the club just ignored? There's good people like you. I'm sure you know Paul Quinn as well. He's very highly thought of in the financial world, and others. It just doesn't make any sense, and the club's going to suffer. Worse, 3 clubs going to be relegated this season, and I'll be honest, life in the Championship. If you talk to Southampton fans, Leicester fans, and Leeds fans who were relegated last season, they're enjoying themselves this season far more than they were last season. So, getting relegated isn't actually the disaster in which it's painted to be, just because you don't get to play Manchester United and Liverpool, Manchester City and Arsenal for a year, and it would only be a 1 year. That's not the worst thing in the world, but it's an unpleasant situation. It becomes farcical when you go into the final match of the season, potentially, or the final 3 or 4 matches of the season, not knowing whether a 2-0 defeat is actually a good result, because it could come down to goal difference, or do we need a point, or do we need a victory? And as a fans, it affects our setup. It's not fair on Sean Dyche. It's not fair on the players, and it's a mess of its own making by the Premier League.
What's your view with regards Everton's second charge, Kieran, particularly in relation to double jeopardy? Because obviously a large proportion of the second charge has already been covered in the time frame from the first charge, and it's something that certainly the layperson would have great difficulty even attempting to get their head around.
It makes, again, no logical sense. If you've already been punished for overspending in 2021 and 2022 with regards to the first set of charges, then to be punished for overspending in 2021 and 2022 again with a second set of charges seems to fail on, I'm not a lawyer, I'm a teacher, but it seems to fail on the law of the Clapham omnibus. That's the way I was sort of brought up, in terms of, you expect that whoever's creating legislation. So all that I can say is that what we know as far as the second Commission's report is concerned is that breaches of the limit are now going to result in points deductions. That's the way forward. Now, you can have a separate discussion as to whether it should be a points deduction, but at least we do know going forwards. If that commission is going to sit independently and make a value decision, then surely the only sensible thing that you can do is to reduce the tariff by 2/3. And so if it's a 3 points deduction, well, Everton have already been punished in the first charges, so therefore you give them a 3 points deduction, 2 of them have been already counted, so that gets reduced to 1. And that would appear to be the least bad of the circumstances. In the case of Nottingham Forest, they've not been subject to a sanction before, so whatever the Commission decides, it should be the full tariff, subject, of course, to any appeal that Everton or Forest should undertake if they are found guilty. And remember, at present, innocent until up.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but surely some of Forest's would have been, if we're going back 3 years, the first year would be they were in the FL club, wouldn't he?
Yeah. So
that's compromised, isn't it? Because you're potentially working with 2 different sets of rules for that accounting period. It's a nonsense, isn't it?
It is, in the sense that under the rules, if you've been a Premier League club for 3 years, you can lose £105 million. If you've been in the Championship for 2 years and the Premier League for 1, you're only allowed to lose 61 million. Now, if you've just been promoted to the Premier League, if you want to stay in the Premier League, you need to spend money. It's tough. We've seen 3 clubs get promoted in last season, and I'm not being rude. I've not seen a side as bad as Sheffield United. We've gone there as Brighton. We've scored 10 goals at Bramall Lane in 3 weeks, and okay, we're not a bad side, but we're not a 10 goals away from home side. They've not spent any money. We know that Burnley have spent a wee bit very much. Luton haven't spent any money, and that they are partly constrained by what they can say. If it's your first year in the Premier League, if we want a genuinely competitive product, you should be giving these clubs extra assistance, not less, because we got this potentially now for the first time in the history of the Premier League and the Championship. The 3 clubs that got promoted last season get relegated, and the 3 sides that got relegated are getting promoted again. That's not good for the game.
That's why listening's here on Monday night as well, Kieran. It was really interesting doing a comparison with American sports and the drafts and all of that. If anything similar to that American model was happening over there, the 3 promoter clubs would be getting first dibs, wouldn't they, on the players? Which I think you made the point that it's quite unusual to have socialist principles in a capitalist sport, which was spot on.
Yeah, and it makes for, and why do they have those rules? It's because ultimately American franchise sports are part of the entertainment industry, and that uncertainty. What we have here is a completely different model. The media don't care about Everton or Brighton or Villa. The media. You look at. We had as a guest on the show, the live show that you attended, with Matt Slater from The Athletic. He's an absolutely brilliant investigative journalist. But I remember when the Athletic was first created, every Premier League club had a dedicated reporter.
Yeah.
Well, we're 3-4 years down. There isn't one for Burnley. There isn't one for Sheffield United. There isn't one for Luton. There isn't one for Bournemouth. We've got 6 for Manchester United. We've got 6 for Liverpool. We've got 6 for Chelsea. We've got 6 for Arsenal. The media are not interested in anybody other than the clubs which generate the most links. I understand why. Ultimately, the media are in there to make money as much as everybody else. When you talk to broadcasters, I thought Leicester City winning the Premier League in 2016, I was great. I yeah, as a football fan, it was great because, again, we are blokes of a certain age. We can remember Derby County, Nottingham Forest, Blackburn Rovers, Everton, Aston Villa, all winning the old First Division on merit, and that's because they were the best teams. And now we're going to spend the rest of our lives with potentially not who's going to be this season, which of those 4 or 5 clubs is it going to be this season?
I think that's a real interesting point, to be honest with you, Kieran, because I think that in the grand scheme of things, that the broadcasters will be sitting back and watching with more than a passing interest about what's going on. And because of the way that football's now being governed and all this nonsense, you look at, for me, one of the highlights of any football season is the 3rd round of the FA Cup draw. With that gone back to midday on a Monday. Well, on a Monday, that's all gone. Latterly, when Sky invented football in 1992, Jim White's yellow tie almost became an institution, didn't it? You look at the January transfer window, nothing happened.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think there's a knock-on effect of what's going on, particularly with 2 clubs now being charged and a couple waiting in the wings. It'll be really interesting to see what happens at the start of next season once that transfer window opens, because the broadcasters have got that extremely valuable commodity to sell. There's not happening when the transfer windows opens. They've clearly got problems, haven't they? And I think the broadcasters will start putting pressure on the Premier League as well about going in the wrong direction here. The Premier League is unique because of the monies that's being thrown at it, and because of the monies that's being spent, hundreds of millions of pounds, whether it be on the top players or paying top wages. If you start removing all of that because of them PSR rules, the game will very quickly stagnate, won't it? And it won't be the attractive commodity that it is at the moment.
You're absolutely right. And, Sky deliver a fantastic product.
Yeah.
You can separate issues with regards to who's owned Sky historically, in terms of the pricing, in terms of the impact on us as fans. You go home and away, I go home and away. Newcastle at 12:30 on a Saturday, or 4:30 p.m. on a Sunday is a nightmare. But we'll still do it. We'll moan about it. That we can park that. It is a fantastic product, and you're absolutely right. What do they do during the non-football season? Because that's their biggest worry, is that people will stop the subscriptions. And one of the ways of stopping the subscriptions is to have a fluid transfer market, which means that you're tuning into Sky Sports News every 5 minutes, because let's face it, that's the only channel I tend to watch. I'll watch a bit of cricket, but football is the big driver, Skynet and so on. So if the money is not there in the summer, and if you take a look at Sky, and again, this is not a criticism, I think they're a fantastically run business, and I've been to the Sky studios, ridiculously professional. They give the Premier League money well before the start of the season, because they know that the Premier League gives the money to the clubs, which allows the clubs to go and get involved in the transfer market, which gives Sky something. So it's a circular relationship, and everybody benefits from it. If clubs are becoming increasingly neurotic as to whether they can sell players, and secondly, whether they should sell those players before the 30th of June or after the 30th of June, because that's being driven by the accounts, because that has an impact on PSR. Nobody's interested in boring old gits like me talking about spreadsheets, but that's driving the game.
I think the highlights for an Evertonian during the transfer window, and who'd have ever thought you'd be walking down Goodison Road listening to fans chanting, "Super, super, super." It's one of the best barristers in the business, and that's the direction the Tigers in, aren't they? You know, he was nearly carried shoulder high down Goodison Road because he's our saviour. He's our 10 points back, you know what I mean, or 6 points back, or 4 points back. And that's how they're changing the demographic of who and what the game is, isn't it?
They are, and look, they're very good at what they do. I've had the privilege of spending time in their company, and they put 100% effort in to do what's best for their clients, and they can make a difference. But we shouldn't be in this situation in the first place, and it's money going out of the game.
Yeah.
Well, would it be ironic if Everton breached them next year because of all the legal fees they've had to pay defending themselves?
Oh, yeah, be crazy. Yeah.
It all goes into it, though, doesn't it? As I say, we don't really know. I mean, the worry I've got is that because of this 3 years, and I know they're talking about changing the rules, but if you get stuck in this spiral, is it the case that literally you talk about things like that, about legal fees? If it all goes into it, then can you get out of that spiral? You know, have you got to literally just sell all your best players, try and replace them with youngsters, and just hope that you can stay in the league? That surely, as I say, profit and sustainability. That's not what that should be about, is it?
No, and we at present we've got neither.
Yeah.
So, you know, going back to one of Dave's earlier points, has the Premier League effectively failed its own objectives, which was to create a sustainable product? I think that there's a good case for saying, well, the numbers suggest that it has failed. And even if you look at, clubs in other divisions, Derby County have just come out of administration. Their first season, they lost 10 million quid. Yeah, this is a club which gets, best part of 30,000 attending every week in the third tier of English football, and every week some guy that's just walked in to take over has got to go and write out a check for 200 grand a week. There's something fundamentally wrong with the business. And sometimes I take a step back because I listen to my mates and mates of other clubs and so on. Are we actually part of the problem, in the sense that we do want the best players, and if there's a chance that one of our star players leaving, what do we say? Well, we're mouthing off on social media or at the match, give him a pay rise, because that's going to cause the losses, which that's going to put the risk of the game at future. But it's a strange one, because.
So you think the problem is as well, Kieran, and I don't doubt for 1 minute that the three people on this call this evening will sit back comfortably tonight and watch Newcastle playing Chelsea at Stamford Bridge. Why? Why are Newcastle having to go down there on a Monday night? And I know earlier on in the season, and being sad bastard I am, I'm thinking, why we play Crystal Palace on a Thursday night at 8:15 on ITV4? What's that all about?
Yeah, nuts.
I constantly get asked by fans, we need to do something, we need to try and influence. We shouldn't be playing all these games at these ridiculous kick-off times. As well, the solution's dead easy. Back to the ribbon next time we put the contender out to the broadcasters. Just tender it in that the Premier League will dictate when the games are played, not the television companies. And that's it. The game as we know it, the game as it's become, is dead, isn't it? We've got the game that we've got because of the millions of pounds that comes in by that broadcast deal. So you can't have one without the other. If you want to take care of the broadcasters hundreds of millions, billions of pounds, you're going to have to, unfortunately, face the inconvenience of having ridiculous kick-off times.
Yeah, for every one person in the stadium, there's 1,000 watching it on telly in the country, and there's 100,000 watching it all around the world. So that genie is out of the bottle, and it's never going back. We've seen now that the Premier League is going to say that every non-3 p.m. match is going to be broadcast live going forward. So we could have 8 clubs in Europe next season. So that means there's an awful lot of Sunday matches are now going to be broadcast live. For me, and again, I'm probably showing my age, there's nothing better than a 3 p.m. Saturday kickoff.
I love it.
No.
Love it.
That routine that I've had since I was, 10, 11 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now it's all day, every day, 3 o'clock kickoff.
Mhm.
But I think you said earlier on, that's all right for us old farts.
Yes.
No, but the thing for me is though that obviously getting back to the fan advisory board now and what we're trying to do with this and the independence of this, that's the sort of thing I think for us we've got to try to educate our fan base and try to guide our fan base as well and try and work with the club to try to do that and that independence for us, it's a massive thing for me that we're independent. And as Dave mentioned earlier on, we reach out to every fab that comes and visits Goodison and that sort of thing. But we're finding that so many of them are, the club are insisting, like we spoke to West Ham a few weeks ago, they still haven't got their fab set up, but the club are insisting that it's a co-chair. You've got a fan and a club like employee on the thing, and that for me it's just so wrong. It's a fan advisory board. It needs to be made up of fans, and as I say, we're trying now to reach out and to try to. It's a difficult one really, because I say we are volunteers. There's 11 of us. We've only got a limited amount of resource, but we're trying to sort of build this bridge between us and the club, and work with our fan base, keep our fan base communicated. But we're also trying to look sideways at all the other fabs and help them along as to where we're at as well. So things like this are absolutely gold dust to me. So thanks very much for your time today, Kieran, because we want to do more of this and we want to be educating our fans as to what's actually going on, not just at our club, but within football on a whole, and how we all fit into that as fans.
I do feel that what you're doing is great. We also know, and I'm not saying this applies to Everton, but there's certainly at other clubs, there are fan channels. And again, I think this is a generational thing. There are fan channels that will go out on YouTube or TikTok or whatever, where shouting loudest and being outrageous is the way to attract attention. And that's fine, because you're not responsible for your actions. Whereas I think what you're trying to do is to say, we are the custodians of Everton Football Club. We are the emotional investors. We acknowledge that there are business considerations as well, but we want to work hand in hand with the club so that we can. If you've got everybody rowing in the same direction, you'll go a lot faster towards your ultimate destination.
Yeah.
And it makes your job that much harder if there are alternatives. I don't know enough about the Everton position in terms of other media outlets, but I've certainly observed it. You've only got to look at the Arsenal TV this season. Their viewing numbers are down. Why? Because the club's successful.
They've stopped ranting, haven't they?
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks very much for your time, Kieran. Really appreciate it. And I don't believe that that hour has flown as quickly as it has. And we haven't even mentioned things like 777.
I've got a long list of 777 for you. Yes, haven't we all?
Yeah, so maybe we look at doing something again with regards to probably more your area of expertise, to be honest with you, finances and takeovers. And but I really appreciate your time, and hopefully it strikes the right chord with the wider fan base, because this isn't about Everton Fan Advisory Board or Evertonians. It's about what's going on at football, and we've all got to be pulling in that one direction. We need to seize and try and grab some of the ownership back of the beautiful game. It's our game, and we can't let them take it off us.
I agree with you entirely. Thanks very much for the invite.
Cheers, Kieran. See you later, Pablo.
All right. Cheers all. Thanks very much.
Okay. Take care, boys.